When I was a kid, it was the best. You had stuff like Power Rangers, Batman the Animated Series, X-Men, and Dragon Ball Z. But my favorite had to be the Ninja Turtles. The cartoons, the toys, the movies, which I watched over and over. It became a sort of a comfort for me when I was a kid because it distracted me through all those lows of being a kid and was there for me during those highs. But as I got older, I got more responsibilities, less time to do the things I loved when I was younger, and that meant less time for Ninja Turtles. I still keep up here and there. I collect some of the figures. I watched Mew Mayhem in theaters this past year. But as I get older, this childhood comfort of mine feels far away. I'm not a teenager. I'm older. I'm a father. And now that my son is about to reach the age of the Turtles, I relate more and more to Splinter, which makes me think about this one line.
Hey Mikey, did you ever think about what Splinter said tonight? I mean about what it would be like. You know, not having him.
Time's up. $3 off.
You ever think about what Splinter said tonight? I mean about what it would be like. You know, not having him.
Time's up.
As of May of 2024, Ninja Turtles will have been around for 40 years, 2 decades longer than most people watching this video has been alive. That's crazy when you really think about how many things have gone by in that time. At any point in its history, Ninja Turtles could have literally died as a franchise. Next Mutation could have been a nail in the coffin for the series due to the introduction of a 5th female turtle, which, for whatever reason, became one of the most hated concepts in the series, even though years later we got not only 1, but 2 female turtles in the comics. I think more so it had to do with the execution of the series rather than the concept. But before I sidetrack into a whole dialogue in the Mutation series, let's move on, because Ninja Turtles as a franchise faced its end multiple times with the failure of the Next Mutation series, which led to a hiatus until the 2003 TMNT animated series, which ended as the 2007 TMT movie released in theaters. Side note, I know the 2007 movie kind of killed some momentum of the franchise, for a bit, but that had less to do with the movie itself. As I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, the 2007 movie was underwhelming, but also at its heart it was a good Ninja Turtle story, which sounds counterintuitive, but it was more designed as a theatrical reintroduction to the old and for new fans alike. Like Next Mutation, the 2007 movie probably should have ended the Turtles. As it stands, it was the last piece of work that Peter Laird had full say over as the sole owner of the franchise at the time. Yet this movie didn't break box office records or anything, nor did it do the job of reinvigorating the franchise. Yet some projects were in development at this point in time, which all got scrapped when Laird did the unthinkable and sold the franchise to Nickelodeon of all companies. The animation studio behind Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Danny Phantom, and yes, the Antichrist himself, SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm kidding. Or am I? Look, I know hindsight is 2020, and I know TMT didn't go sideways and get buried like Disney has done with Star Wars, but fans were worried. I remember hearing when it was sold for 60 million, and with adjustment to about 80 million with inflation over the years.
Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
60 million, really? I mean, I'm not rich or anything, not even close. Seriously.
Help me, I'm poor.
But if I really think about how much joy and solace this franchise has given me over the years, and I imagine to millions of other people in the world, 60 million isn't that much. I mean, Star Wars was sold for billions, Marvel the same. Now, I'm not saying the Turtles have that history or catalog of characters, but damn, really? Like, you're telling me if somehow I got investors, I could have bought the Turtles. I'm exaggerating, but it's not as unrealistic in comparison to say something like Star Wars or Marvel. I mention it because it was a sign of just how little the franchise was valued at that time. During that period between the sale and the first release from the Nick era in 2012, there was a lot of unease. Most Ninja Turtle fans were adults during this time, so having a kids network take charge of our beloved franchise was not easy. I know this doesn't come across well to kids growing up now, but for the kids growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, we attach ourselves to these franchises we loved during our childhood because adult life has been hard. So we needed something to rebuild our relationship with that franchise that was part of our happiest moments as a kid. Look, being an adult nowadays is rough and stressful, so we look to our childhood and try to reconnect, whether by gaming, watching our favorite movies, collecting, or whatever it is. Look, that sounded a lot more dramatic than needed, but we just wanted something that wasn't garbage, and well, it was 50-50. On the one hand, we got the 2012 series. The 2012 series had a lot to live up to. It very well held the future of the franchise in its hands. If it were to completely flop, then it could signal the end for TMT. On the other hand, it had the difficult task of not only appealing to new fans, but also making sure that it didn't alienate older fans. And as we all know, fans are always kind and fair to new reboots of their favorite franchises.
It's false. No way. Not this time. We created it. Not this time. No.
I had watched the series as it aired, so I decided to rewatch some of the series before I did this video. And you know, my feelings are pretty much the same. This series was a shit. Excuse my language. But it had so much going for it. From the character design that was new and fresh but still felt like the Ninja Turtles, to all this other stuff. Let's look at the Ninja Turtles. They were all varied and stood apart in their silhouettes, which is something hard to do with the Turtles at times because the only thing that really separates them in some instances are their weapons. So this series took a step forward in really making each turtle unique. Leo is the most balanced of everyone, not so tall, not so short, or stocky. Raph is shorter than Leo, but stockier than the rest of the turtles. Also, he's the strongest of them. Donatello is the tallest of the four, but is lankier than the others. And Mikey is the smallest in terms of height and body, which makes sense as he's still the goofy prankster of the four in this series. The design of the other characters in the series were solid. Everyone from Shredder to Metalhead, Splinter, and even new characters like Pete the Pigeon. Pigeon turned into a man-pigeon hybrid, which is so silly and goofy and fits so well into this world that they're trying to create. Awesome. Then we have the world around them. I grew up in the tri-state area, so New York is in my backyard. I am literally one train ride away from entering the city, or one ferry, or a short car ride over. I've been in the city to the point of nauseam. I've worked in various boroughs, and I'm really particular in how media portrays the city because a lot of times we get the aesthetically pleasing and superficial part of the city, which tends to grow larger and larger every day, but we miss out on all the other moving parts of the city that the commercials and movies don't always want to mention. Now, if you're a long-term Turtle fan, you'll know that part of the inspiration for the Turtles was the Marvel comic hero Daredevil, who lives in Hell's Kitchen, New York.
Really aped a lot of like Frank Millerisms and Daredevilisms. I mean, you look at the origin, you know, the hand in Daredevil, we have the foot, you know, Splinter is based on Stick. We really pulled some of our favorite bits from some of our favorite comics and what do you call it?
Hell's Kitchen is a weird New York City neighborhood that encompasses a chunk of Manhattan. This area is unique in the city because while in the present it's pretty upscale, with studio apartments easily averaging over $3,000 a month. But there is something to be said of how it was before. An area full of middle-class people made up historically of mostly Irish and Hispanics, filled with shady criminal elements, and this is the kind of neighborhood I tend to believe the Turtles exist in. And apparently so did the animators on this one. The atmosphere, the setting, all come together into this really awesome CGI version of the city. One cool design choice is the ending screen, where at the end of every episode it closes off into a freeze frame that focuses on the character in the scene and then turns it into comic frame. You guys can look at yourself since I don't think I'm properly explaining it. It's these little design choices and callbacks to the full of Turtles history from the comics, movies, and older cartoons. That being said, the show also had some weird choices that I wasn't always on board with. The whole Donatello in love with April storyline is not my thing, and that's not because I don't think the Turtles shouldn't have relationships, because at the end of the day they're people, well, turtle people, but it's just a weird dynamic because it was written so poorly. An argument can be made as to April in general being a victim of terrible writing, but April-tello, as I learned the term after deep diving to the darkest parts of my Google search, is just annoying, and dare I say, it's cringe. Which, you know, at some point all teenage relationships are, but this was just awkward and weird. It only got worse after a while. To me, it felt like the writers didn't plan out what they wanted to do with the two of them, leading to weird moments like this.
Thank you guys.
You are so welcome.
Neck okay, Donnie?
Ooh, yeah, a little lower. Did you see when I caught the one guy and flipped him onto the counter? Did it look cool?
The coolest.
You didn't see it, did you?
No, I did not.
You did great!
Thanks, guys. You're the best. You're not just a mutant, Donnie. You're my mutant. Mwah.
It's frustrating because the writing in other places are really well done. The relationship between the brothers and Splinter's ooze family, they feel functional and at times dysfunctional like anyone's family. The hate-filled feud between Shredder and Splinter was great. The twist with Karai. But putting my other gripes to the side, it's an awesome series and told a great and entertaining story. And if you remotely like the Ninja Turtles, give it a watch. So, Nickelodeon was off to a good start, but then they let Michael Bay screw around with the live-action version of the Turtles. And not to go in too deep with these movies, but they're not the worst. On a scale of the first movie and Next Mutation, they're somewhere in the middle. Visually, it's hit or miss. It's not the worst, but people complained the Turtles look weird, and they did. But I was just happy that we had a movie in the theaters because at this point, at least Nick seemed to really have an intent on making this franchise work. Personally, I think the second one was pretty decent. We finally saw Bebop and Rocksteady in live action, and Krang, and the Technodrome, and for stuff like that, it's kind of awesome, even if it was kind of bad at the same time. It's pretty much if Ninja Turtles and Fast and Furious had a movie baby, and you get these two movies. And then we've been given a hodgepodge of different things, stuff like The Last Ronin, which I think has been thoroughly covered on YouTube, but I'll probably cover it at some point. It's a really good book. Turtles are dead. Michelangelo's still around. On the short end, it deals with the Turtles more so as adults, the consequences of their actions, the long-term consequences, and the world building that was done on this comic is really awesome because now we're getting all these other comics based around that world, and I think it's really great that we can finally get the Turtles to move in a new direction rather than kind of retracing back the steps of the same stories. Nick also gave us the Rise of the TMT, which is just weird, and I'm trying to watch it, but I keep getting distracted every time, so I've ended up watching the same 5 to 7 minutes of the first episode like 10 times. So I don't want to judge it, but it seems to be like one of those kind of series where you either like it or you don't. It's got this Teen Titans Go kind of style, Amazing World Gumball, that kind of Cartoon Network, short slapstick style. And I guess that works for some people and doesn't work for others. Like I said, I haven't given it a fair shot, so I don't want to go say it's trash. I'm kind of leaning towards that opinion and that mindset, but I want to give it a fair shot because there's a lot of work that went into that. The most current term project aside from comic stuff is Mutant Mayhem, which is a different and a completely fresh take on the series. It's not perfect, and it's definitely a departure from everything that came before it. I liked it, but I can really understand where some people might not see eye to eye with the creator Seth Rogen's vision. He really emphasized the teenage attitude, but also there was a lot of that lore that was missing in the first movie. A lot of shortcuts were taken to kind of disconnect it from stuff that came before it, which I can understand in some ways because you want to create something that's distinct, so people don't have to go through hours of stuff just to know what's happening. You can kind of just jump into it. The art style is different. It's got kind of like this water CGI aesthetic to it, so it's different, but different is good. TMT 2003 was different. It worked out. 2012 TMNT was different. It worked out. In order for a franchise to grow, you always have to try and do different things. It's not always going to work, but you don't grow without doing that. But this brief history of Turtle Media is more so to really dig into the fact that despite the love I have for a lot of Turtle stuff, comics, other movies, series, I always tend to go back to the first live action movie. To this day, it remains the most impactful and influential piece of Turtle Media, but for me personally, at least I can say, a lot of the movie really has helped me get through a lot of things in life. Admittedly, when I was a kid, I can't remember when I first saw this movie. I was barely 3 years old when it came out. Maybe I saw it in theaters, or my mom rented it at a local video store, but at some point when I was older, my mom bought me the VHS copy. My mom did her best, yet at times I felt empty and lost in my head, as all kids do. Even the best childhoods can lead to moments of distress and anger, and in a world like the Ninja Turtles, I can lose myself there. Their struggles were my struggles, their wins were my wins. I was with them every step of the way. I think for most Ninja Turtle fans, the one thing we all tend to do is to associate ourselves with one of the turtles that most commonly matched up with our personality traits. That hot-headed friend was Raphael, that goofy guy in the group was Michelangelo, the level-headed one of course was Leonardo, and the nerdy smart one, aka me, was always Donatello. So, when Donatello asked Mikey if he thought about what Splinter had said to them earlier about him not being around anymore, he deflects and focuses on the pizza delivery at hand. Dejected, Donatello looks at him and puts his head down. This is real life though. Looking past the giant humanoid turtles, ask any person if they ever thought about their parents and what they would do if they were gone. The answers would be all over the place. Some would be emotional, others would make jokes and deflect the seriousness of their situations, and some couldn't care any less. Some would get angry, while others would contemplate their place in the world without them. To better understand my random thoughts, early in the movie the turtles come back from their first real fight to tell Splinter about how they won. Splinter begins a lecture, as all parents do, on the lessons that they can take from the situation, with a stern warning about the dangers of stepping out of the shadows in a world that may not be so kind to them in return. Raphael is frustrated with the fact that he lost his sai, which plays a role later in the film. Michelangelo orders a pizza, and Leonardo and Donatello sit down with Splinter as he speaks. One throne book later, and the turtles are all attentive as Splinter understands that they're young, but that one day he won't be around anymore, so he hopes for them to use what he taught them wisely. But take a look at what I said. Take the parts of the fight and the lost sai, and you have a family of brothers, with the father in charge doing his best to guide them. They're experiencing the same conversation but differently, just like each of us experience anything. We can all watch the same movies at the same time, be the same age, similar life experiences, and yet we will see parts of it differently through a lens of our own creation. Our worldview is partly built by our experiences, but more so in how we react to those experiences. No one is ever really the same, even twins. So, no one's worldview is exactly alike. Splinter's message here is in preparations for his son to deal with the world where he may no longer be around, which is unique to this movie in a sense because it's the first time in any media up to that point, be it cartoons or the original comics, where Splinter actively comments about him being gone in any meaningful way, and that's a message that any person or culture can relate to. Throughout the course of the movie, Splinter is eventually kidnapped, and this leads to the turtles struggling for the first time in their lives to fend for themselves. Each of the four deal with things in unique ways, but the most fascinating journey in the film is the growth of Raphael from the start to finish. It's really easy to write off Raphael's actions as angry and bullheaded, while disregarding his frustration and inner demons, something that Splinter acknowledges to Raphael in a touching moment early on in the film.
Anger clouds the mind. Turned inward, it is an unconquerable enemy. You are unique among your brothers, for you choose to face this enemy alone.
I think we can all say at some point we've been angry or frustrated. Maybe the job you wanted didn't hire you. Maybe you were betrayed by a partner or spouse, or maybe you just had a bad day. Anger, for some, is like a disease. It can affect you to the point where it's almost impossible to control, and unfortunately, it comes at the worst situations. Anger can lead to resentment and a further downfall, or it can be an opportunity for growth. I think the writers tended to focus a lot on Raphael's journey from hot-headed lone wolf to dedicated member of the team, probably because he was one of the more relatable characters in the film. Sure, they rehashed the storyline in the second film, but he had a solid character arc in the first film. It's just good writing, and I know at times the other brothers get lost in the shuffle, but I think around the time, Raphael had the most defined personality, especially since Eastman and Laird wanted to avoid too many connections to the animated series, as the first cartoon was a big departure from the original style and story of the Turtle comics. But I think a larger part of this movie tends to be the dueling philosophies of Splinter and Shredder, and this has been expanded on in other media, but we have two different ideas of what family means and what one must do. Shredder is a style where your work determines your worth to your family, but also this idea has this kind of gang mentality where their whole mindset revolves around the manipulation of their followers, as opposed to Splinter, whose focus is that of a father to teach his kids the best he can to survive in this world, showing more about the importance of bonding with family and supporting one another in a meaningful way rather than using one another to further one's own agenda. I have lived my whole life at this point relating more and more to the characters in this movie. When I was younger, I'd made mistakes, said things I regret as a teenager and young adult, taking in lessons from my parents and mentors to move forward similar to the journey of the four turtles. As an adult and now as a father, I relate more and more to Splinter and how I raised my son struggling in this journey as a parent, but giving my all to make sure I've tried my best to teach him the things that I believe will help him in life. As I best can articulate, Ninja Turtles has changed for me as I got older. It used to be something that I used as a link to my childhood, which in some ways it still is. Over the years, it became more of something I could reflect on with the stories of tragedy, adversity, philosophy expressed in this crazy whacked out story about four big mutant turtles and their rat father. So, as I come back to that scene where Donatello asks Mikey whether he has put any thought into the idea of what he would do if suddenly Splinter wasn't around, and I think, what would I do if TMT wasn't around anymore? Or if it's me that starts drifting away, and the answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that it's hard being a person some days, and you need to do what works for you to keep yourself healthy and sane. Life is weird, and the older I get, the further away my childhood feels. I can't pause, rewind it, or manipulate it, so that distance is always going to get wider and wider. And that's okay. Ultimately, we grow and we get older, and like Splinter, at some point, I'll be gone too. But for now, I'll be living life one day at a time. Thanks for watching. I want to try something different with this video, so I really hope that you guys do enjoy it. You can follow me on Instagram for more from me, including updates and other things like that. But for now, and as always, take care and have an awesome day.